You might try your hardest, your damnedest even, to approach a film with total objectivity, but you will inevitably bring certain filters and pet causes to your viewing. Whether it's conspiracies, the amorphous flow between the mind and reality, or mythology, and as I write this, I predict Joe will have said this word at least 3 times in his Birdman review, which did not turn out to be true. Ideas like these will always be pulling you in a particular direction when trying to parse the meaning or reason behind a story. For example, I can only reconcile certain behaviors in Barton Fink or Badlands by placing the narrative almost fully inside the minds of the protagonists, despite the fact that it's not presented that way in either case. But while it might fit neatly into our subject for these 2 episodes to talk about that, I'd rather talk briefly about 2 other things that are often on my mind when watching a film or reading a book, which are the mistreatment of the mentally ill and feminism. Now, before I go on, I need to make sure that I'm not representing myself as anything close to resembling an expert on either subject. I haven't read extensively about either. I can only speak to what I've picked up from the general culture. Henry Koster's Harvey is ostensibly about alcoholism, but is actually about mental illness. In fact, it seems to conflate the two. It was written in a time in which the mentally ill were treated as social pariahs, as were most drunks, long before they gained the little bit of dignity that they have in the eyes of current mainstream society, long before being a little bipolar or being a little OCD became an adorable personality quirk. The film is never clear about what causes the other, if that's even something that could be made clear in the first place, but all of the people that can see Harvey, the invisible human-sized rabbit, are drunk or popping all manner of pills, or both. The bartender at Charlie's, the bar that Harvey and his main human companion Elwood Dowd hang out at every afternoon, may or may not actually see Harvey, but he does take him seriously, serving a drink to an empty stool. Elwood's sister considers him to be an embarrassment, since all of their high society friends will be and are scared off by his odd behavior, so she brings him to a mental rest home that doesn't seem too concerned with the comfort of its patients. I can only guess that shock treatment isn't mentioned due to a Hays Code restriction. The main doctor is a handsome dummy that is too wrapped up in his own mind to see what the reality of any situation might be. The orderly is a brutish numbskull who hides a blackjack in his drawer, and the owner of the place doesn't personally handle any cases until he is under threat of lawsuit. The women in their lives keep trying to tell them something, but they won't listen, not even in the rest home owner's fantasies. They just won't take women seriously. It's the times. It's hard to imagine a time when women had to be officially presented to society instead of being allowed to be a person who exists by virtue of just being a person who can walk and talk among other humans. The action of the film hinges on the fact that Elwood's niece, Myrtle May, is trying to come out to society. If she'd been allowed to skip this oddball custom, Uncle Elwood wouldn't be a problem and wouldn't have had to be taken away, and we also would have had a very short, pointless movie. I also can't tell if the character of Myrtle May is supposed to be near 40. If so, this paints the family in a more eccentric light if she's that old and still, needs to be presented to society. Kelly, assistant to the dumb doctor, is constantly trying to get him to pay attention to the clear facts of the case. He thinks that she isn't worth his time. Elwood does, though. He chose being pleasant over being smart. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. I feel like I'm reaching a bit, though, with all this. It's a hard film to write about, at least in a thoughtful or meaningful way. It's merely okay. For a film about serious things, it is very light and comic, with some successful gags and some gags that I didn't really care for that much, and some character actions that seem to come from nowhere. Jimmy Stewart is great, though. I enjoyed watching him be courteous to air.
Well, Jeff, thank you very much. Did Jeff strike abrupt ending?
That was awesome. Courteous to air. I love that shit.
Like Joe, Jeff is the only one that's like you're not sure if he's done yet.
You really have a good sense of that too. I always get worried that you're going to try to break in too quick on mine, but you have a really good sense of when the review is ending.
Right.
I hear that Jeff throws you off, which is odd because he's your brother, and you really should actually.
He's got to work on those endings. That's what. Listen, though, that was a good intro, Jeff. your best yet, no doubt about it. Wouldn't you agree, Joe?
I liked his. There was one that he just did. The last one you did, Jeff. What was it?
Was that Zodiac?
Yeah, I like Zodiac. I did. I liked the Zodiac one.
Yeah.
Actually. But yeah, Bill, good job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You're
yeah. I
coming
mean,
along
this. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was tough just because there's not. I mean, there's stuff in there, but it's pretty light,
I agree with
or a light presentation, I should say.
I agree with a lot of the stuff you said. However, I really enjoyed this movie, like much more than I thought I ever would. I thought it was it was very emotional for me for some reason, and a lot of it had to do with Stewart's performance and just his his over kindness and his just willingness to just go with the flow no matter what, no matter how awful the situation might be. And real quick, it just reminds me of everyday life in the sense that I could be going through something completely horrible and I feel dark and dismal and hopeless, and then I could do something like go to a store or go to a bar or just walk down the street, and you just run into someone like Elwood that just makes everything seem okay. That there's someone out there that's like that. That's just kind-hearted.
Yeah, if you're willing to accept that into your life, like if you could also see someone like that and wonder what they're up to. Like these society people.
Right. Like I took a cab home from work the other day, and this cab driver, he was just like, just a nice, quiet, just a wonderful person. And now who knows what he's doing at home, though?
Yeah.
But no, seriously. But I love that. I love those. I love the fact that there are human beings out there like that are just simple,
Yeah.
and they're just here to be kind, and I really appreciate that. Okay. With all that being said, I do want to talk about what you brought up, and that's the treatment of the mentally ill and the feministic approach to this film. Here's the thing about these movies that predate the '60s is that they're not willing to take things to a different level. And they keep their ideas contained. If this film is made today and it could let loose, it would be brilliant. Like the music in this movie drives me crazy because this should be like a very dark piece of cinema, and unfortunately, they're just not there yet. In the mainstream anyway in 1950. So you get this fluffy music.
Yeah, it's like the same like I Love Lucy opening credits that like all those films have.
Yeah, and I mean this should be really, I keep using the word dark, but
Spielberg was trying to get it made a few years ago. Actually, they were
somebody should, honestly,
there was one made in the 90s.
I suggest that it has been remade as a completely different film, not an intentional remake at all. But have you guys seen Lars and the Real Girl?
Oh yes,
or even how about Donnie Darko? Would like Donnie Darko? I mean, have you seen Donnie Darko? Because I mean that's a very dark film that centers around somebody's imaginary friend being a large rabbit. But but Adam, you're saying Lars and the Real Girl is like really a companion piece to Harvey?
Well, like Jeff said, obviously this movie, if you were to look at it through today's lenses, is horrific in the treatment of mental illness and alcoholism and women, the whole sexism. But this was a mainstream movie. It was not a progressive movie, and it was made for the mainstream, and that's how that's the way the world was back then. What can we do? But if you were to take I think what that movie was going for, and to take someone who has a form of a mental illness and has an imaginary friend and deal with it in an honest way, but in a very funny, real, touching way, I think you have Lars and the Real Girl. I think that's what that is. That whole movie's about. I think it's a brilliant film too.
Right. Well, but Lars and the Real Girl, if I remember, I mean, I haven't seen it in a few years, but I did watch it when it came out. It's a hopeful movie, right? If I remember correctly. Like it's more of an upbeat piece. Yeah, I mean,
it's not a dark movie. It doesn't go dark with it. It definitely is more of a uplifting, feel good kind of thing.
Yeah, because
But
I think what we're dealing with, the subjects that we're dealing with here in Harvey, it deserves more of a dark tone. All the stuff, and it would have made for probably a, instead of it just being a really good movie, which it is, could be a brilliant movie if redone. Now, somebody was just saying that Spielberg was thinking about doing this again. Joe, was that you?
Yeah, he was ramping up, but I think he let it
that
go.
would be a
So
guaranteed shit pile.
yeah, because he wouldn't. I don't think Spielberg. It would be weird to see what he does with it, because I don't know that he would ground it in any kind of social commentary about mental illness or alcoholism at all. You know.
Right.
All right, I'm going to disagree with you guys here for a second, okay? Like, I get what you're saying, of course, and you're absolutely right. But all of you guys, or Jeff, especially what you brought up in your review there. However, I would just say that you do have to make certain allowances for films and watch them within the context that they're watching them. I don't think that necessarily justifies it, because
But
of course novels were being written in the 40s and 50s and the 1910s and the 19th century that dealt with actual mental illness, and they didn't kind of brush it aside as something of a whimsy. However, I think if you just accept what, again, I know you have to kind of look at it through one eye, or through through your fingers. You know what I mean?
Well,
but I think that they use
there's a term cultural relativism, which is like looking, back at earlier times with that lens of someone from 1800 who's a has progressive thoughts, like they're going to seem racist just because that was like the way that you were back then. Like you
have to see things through context.
Listen,
you know what I mean?
I work in mental health, and trying to, when the doctor stands up and says, "I'm going to miss all these psychos and
the schizos and stuff,"
and schizos, and it's like, yeah, obviously, I find that offensive if that were a movie being made today, but
and the thing is, and I this probably wasn't clear enough in what I was saying, but I feel like it's trying to approach these subjects like it's trying to condemn that doctor as much as it can for the time. Like he's a bad doctor, so him saying schizos and neuros and stuff like that, like maybe at the time, like the audience would have been like, "Oh, that's really funny that he just said that."
So
I think it probably got a laugh in the movie theater.
Yeah,
I think that
and
was
like the audience was probably like, "Oh, you got to send this guy out of here. He's ruining the party."
Exactly. Right.
But here's why I think that you can kind of make an allowance for it, or I can make an allowance for it. If in another setting, I would definitely have issue with it. But I think that what the subject matter, that like the mental illness is and alcoholism is secondary to what they're actually getting at, to what they're trying to talk, to what the playwright was trying to talk about, which is more the focus, and the main subject matter was more on society versus the absurdity. Like basically she's posing the question of what's more absurd, a guy who sees a 6-foot rabbit or a society party. You know what I mean? And just showing that, if you put these social conventions and you kind of look at it through a different perspective, you see that the guy who sees the 6-foot rabbit is actually happier. I think that, it was a little bit of a sort of a miscue or misfire, or just maybe not would have been judged differently in today's light, but just using drunkenness and mental illness, as a subject matter that just was not even really considered seriously for the most part on film. They just used that as a way to get to what the actual subject matter was, which is that, like that thing at the end where he says, I take a lot of rides out with people to that mental hospital, to the loony bin, he calls it, or whatever, something like that, right? And he says, they're always much happier. Sometimes we watch the sunset, on the way up. Sometimes we watch the sunset when it's raining, and that's the point of it. And he's like, and when they come back and they're all fixed and they're so-called sane, they're always angry and miserable. You know what I mean? And I don't think that necessarily they're talking about being schizophrenic or bipolar or manic depressive. I think that they're talking about, not taking the world so seriously and approaching your views with a sort of sense of whimsy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do. Of course, you're right. I mean, of course, it's dated in its treatment of it, but again, I just think that the focus and the main subject, is something else. Which makes it, if you can allow yourself to kind of suspend your judgment on it, which I admittedly might not be so easy. It's just really is a whimsical and beautiful film, especially for all those things that we were talking about. So.
Yeah. How am I sounding all right?
You're here, Tom. Good.
Okay. All right. Jesus. I'm like, I can't even concentrate on what you're saying, Joe. I'm just like paranoid that the fucking.
I was trying. The gout has come into your computer. I was just trying to give you enough time to come back to clear the gout out.
I'm just sitting. I'm thinking to myself. I'm like, all right, these guys are really gonna have to pretty much do this on their own. Like, I'm just sitting here listening. Oh my God! I'm so sorry. All right. Anyway, so we're talking about Harvey.
But remember, Adam. Actually, sorry, Tom. I don't mean to continue this.
No, please do. The less I have to say tonight, the better.
Yeah, go treat your computer for the. But remember, we did, or both you guys actually. Remember, we did the one show with Ron Howard, and we were talking about A Beautiful Mind, and that really irked me, the way that they treated schizophrenia in that film. And they even they were trying to give it a serious treatment, right. And the subject was schizophrenia, but like, as serious as Ron Howard was trying to treat it, it was like a high school play where, his friendly companions were following him around, and then everything was great in the end, and the guy won the Nobel Prize. You know what I mean? And that was more offensive to me than this film,
Yeah, this. I really thought for a minute, like toward the end of this film, that it was about. You're gonna think I'm crazy. Like, it was about trying to treat this guy's dysfunction, because I thought that for a minute I thought that doctor, who we were all frowning upon, might have been some kind of a mad genius, and he was. Am I all right, Joe?
Yeah.
And I'm suffering from paranoia.
PTSD.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought that he might have been some kind of a wacky genius, because I thought that he might have been playing this idea of him seeing Harvey as a way to cure Elwood of Harvey by pretending to keep him by keeping Harvey at the asylum. Right. And then Elwood would leave and be rid of Harvey's companionship, because he stayed behind with the doctor, which didn't happen. So for a moment at the end, I'm like, oh my God, this might be fucking beyond brilliant if this happens, in my mind anyway. But it didn't happen that way.
That would have been beyond brilliant. That would have been, I think, exquisite writing for the time.
Right. But unfortunately, there was a sunset, a rainless sunset, though, Joe.
That's right. Well, just what you're talking about is actually what happened in the Leonardo DiCaprio Scorsese film.
Yeah,
The Island, right?
Right.
What was it?
Shutter Island. Shutter Island. That's right.
I never saw Shutter Island, Joe.
Yeah, they kind of let the lunatic, live out his fantasies as a kind of a treatment.
Oh, that's amazing. And he was ultimately cured?
I don't think so. I don't remember the ending of it, but I do remember what you were just talking about, is like kind of humoring the nutty guy to like his fantasies as a way to kind of as a kind of method of therapy, right, Adam? Something like that.
As I recall, yeah, it's been a while since I saw it.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it too.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, because I thought that's where they were going with this movie, and I was just kind of like, fucking 1950 Hollywood, at the end, it was just kind of.
Well, I would say it's smart for them not to have done that, because what that would be doing is basically saying that you could just trick this person in like. Thinking like, oh, he's my friend. Yeah, he's hanging out with me now. Like, like this.
Yeah. Like you would do to a 5-year-old.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Oh, so you're saying that it would be more insulting to
Yeah.
the medicine practice? If he was, yeah, but still, I mean, it would have cured him of this, and more importantly, it would have been more beneficial to Myrtle May,
Yeah.
Myrtle May. Who,
and how great, Jeff?
do you know, by the way, guys? Do you know that I had a great aunt, my grandmother's sister, who at around 19 basically was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and this was in the early what would it have been? Like the 1920s. And so she was institutionalized primarily because, well, they couldn't really take care of her, but also it was kept complete secret from the family because the fear was in a family with 7 other brothers and sisters, they wouldn't be able to be married off. So it was kept a secret, and we didn't even find out about it until the 80s. In the late 80s. We discovered her as an old lady in basically a nursing home situation, and she was the last one of the 8 brothers and sisters alive, and that's kind of how we discovered her.
Wow.
But yeah, so I mean, again, talk about the cultural relativity, the fear of having a family member with mental illness because you won't be able to marry someone off was very, very real.
That is wacky.
Yeah.
Wow. It was like a secret, like it was always a secretive type of thing.
Yeah.
Like it was a shame to have like any kind of mental illness.
And it's not that long ago, too.
So yeah, but there still are stigma attached to being mentally ill. I mean, Adam, you work in the field somewhat, right? I mean, you like people still have, they kind of treat you a little bit like a sort of a leper in a sense.
Absolutely, it still exists. It's getting better. It still exists, and my theory is that primarily a lot of the reason it exists is because it's something that you can't really point to it on an X-ray. Someone has diabetes. You take a blood test and you can point to a result on a piece of paper. You can look at an X-ray of someone who has cancer
or the gout.
The gout, yeah, they can look at it. They can point and say, "Hey, look, man, you and your computer, you guys have the gout." But
you guys,
but you can't really do that with mental illness, and so there's that stigma. There's still sometimes a belief system that psychiatry is a quack science, and that that people
really
just need to pull their shit together. And there's still, I think that it's hard for a lot of people to accept certain kinds of mental illness, and then other kinds of mental illness, people are scared of. If you see someone walking down the street talking to themselves, it's off-putting.
It is right. It is. Listen, and it's scary though, Adam, because I take the bus into work sometimes, and there is a dude that comes on the bus and he's arguing with. He's definitely mentally ill. I mean,
you were saying earlier that like you were putting the kids in front of you were shielding yourself with the kids from the crazy Mexican guy.
No, don't say crazy Mexican guy, Joe, please. See, that's not right. That's exactly what we're talking about here, Joe. People like you. That just don't. You just can't. You just can't. You don't have any empathy for anyone. Listen.
By the way, there's still just a lot of misunderstanding about mental illness, and that only fuels, the fear. I think anytime people don't really understand,
because it's construed like they feel like they're in danger.
Well, and a lot of times, obviously, media has a lot to do with that. The idea that, there are people with schizophrenia that drive through, through crowds of people because the voices made them do it, but plenty of people without schizophrenia do that, and being schizophrenic does not mean that you are a dangerous person. But a lot of people just automatically make the assumption that someone who has schizophrenia hears voices that tell them what to do things, and that's a dangerous person.
Right.
And that's just not true. And people, call people with schizophrenia they've got multiple personalities, and that's not true. There's not even really such a thing as a multiple personality disorder. And then, even some people that suffer depression, people that don't suffer depression don't understand it. They look at it and just think, listen, this person just needs to push themselves harder. They just need to try harder. They just need to get up and go to work and, just ignore the shit that's keeping them down.
But there's a lot more. There's a lot more to. There's a lot more to depression than people really think, right, Adam? Like honestly, because I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it in my family, and it is god awful. And I know I even have it, and it's really boy. I mean, it consumes you. But let me get back to the guy in the bus, Adam, because I'm
crazy Mexican.
No, not the crazy, not the crazy Mexican. But this other dude, like he rocks back and forth, and he kind of argues with himself about things, and he's always talking to himself. But I watch him, and I'm like, I'll be honest with you, Adam, and like you're. I hope you don't think less of me, but I do feel kind of awkward and in fear a little bit that the guy's gonna snap, and that's wrong of me to feel that way.
Listen, if you're taking New Jersey public transit, I don't think it's wrong of you to think anyone on that bus may snap at any point.
Yeah, Adam, you're absolutely right. I think New Jersey transit in itself is a mental illness. Wouldn't you probably agree with that?
Listen, I try to avoid the New Jersey public transit at all costs, but I don't live in New Jersey, so it's much easier for me.
All right, but my question for you is: have you ever used New Jersey transit system?
Yes, when I visit New Jersey, of course, absolutely, I do.
You'll get on a bus, or you'll get on a train.
I'll get on public transportation anywhere. It is true, though. I think the incidence of running into people that might have mental illness goes up.
Adam, I always, when I'm ever on a bus or a train or wherever I'm in close quarters traveling with anyone, no matter what, even if it's just simply a car, I always think of Max Cook and how he would feel in that situation.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because he's definitely not a public transportation guy.
Probably not so much. No, not so much.
So,
but you know what? Just to wrap up a thought with this, the public transit and mental health. I actually had an experience when I lived in Seattle, and this is going back, over 20 years now, where I rode the bus a lot, and there was a woman that would occasionally be on the same bus who was clearly mentally ill and would talk to herself. I remember one time I was sitting next to her, but across the aisle, and she was just going on and on about nonsense, really, just kind of word salad. And everyone on the bus was ignoring her, including myself at the time. And this was before I worked in mental health. And I was just kind of doing what everyone usually does, is just kind of ignore and don't make eye contact. Yeah. And I wish, now that I go back and change it, but now I would have a different experience. Now that I have worked in mental health and understand that it's an illness and it's not the person, I would have probably tried to engage that person. I don't know that I would have gotten far. This is an unmedicated person who was probably schizophrenic, but the fear is gone. I've been able to separate the idea that this is a disease and an illness, not the person.
So you think that the perception of potential violence is misconceived?
I think that's what he's getting at, Joe. I think that because I have that perception when I see someone in public acting like that. I was saying earlier, like, I get a fear. And Adam,
well, there's no way to reason with it, or it's hard. It's something that you don't understand. So I mean, it's very human.
True. Very true.
Oh, absolutely. And the reality is, if somebody has a delusional disorder and is unmedicated and untreated, not that they are predisposed to being violent, but it might be a little more unpredictable, and you're not, you can't predict what their behavior is going to be, and you can't really have a reasonable, rational conversation with somebody. And so, you got to be safe, you got to be smart, but I'd say that about anything. You never know who's going to.
I was just going to say, right? Like that can happen with the guy, who's all juiced up in the gym and gets into his whatever Dodge Charger.
Absolutely.
Probably has more of a chance of him having an outbreak of violence than somebody who's talking to him.
It could happen to a perfectly normal person that's even been working, say, for the post office for 20 years.
Oh, exactly. So, I think there is a big misperception, and I think anytime someone with schizophrenia or a mental illness, you hear about it in the media, it's tied in with, with violence, then that perpetuates that, that thought, that concept.
Yeah. They're not going to have a news story about the guy that talked to himself and then just got right off the bus and kept on walking down the street.
That doesn't sell commercial time on the evening news.
Absolutely not. All right, oh man. All right, guys. Great discussion with Harvey. Great subject, Joe. Man, you're really
Yeah, you liked it. You know, before we got on recording, you, if I recall correctly, it's been a while now, Tom.
Yeah.
But you said you really dug these movies and that you really needed the movies.
Yeah.
So you enjoyed Harvey.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I really did. It blew me away how good it was. I mean, seriously. I mean, like we were talking about earlier. I mean, it was just covering subject matter. That was. Oh, here they go. They're gonna take me away, Joe. Hold on.
They're coming to take me
They're
away.
gonna lock me up, man. Yeah, it's all over.
To the funny farm.
But anyway, no, I totally dug it, man. You know, again, like I was saying earlier, I mean, I saw a couple of spots where they could have taken some things further, and like I said, it definitely could have been more dark. But I think for this time, for 1950, Stewart's performance is excellent. I think he's going into territory that really hasn't been explored yet in American films, and I was really impressed with it.
Oh, that's cool, man. Every time that we review an old movie, it's always like, oh, how's it gonna work? How's it gonna happen? Or,
Yeah.
how are people gonna react? Because it is such a different viewing experience to watch
Totally.
a true classic, you know. But this time for me, and it sounds like you're sort of you're starting to warm up as we move on into these seasons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for me, like I put on Harvey, and I'm like, you know, like I don't. It's like it's almost like visiting an old like somewhere old, you know what I mean? Like it's somewhere comfortable.
You know what's
to me,
really
you know?
helped, I think, with viewing these older films, and yeah, you know, I mean, you've known me for a long time, and you know, with me, anything that predates 1960, I've always had a problem with. But since we've done, you know, we've been doing this show for over 3 years now, and what has been very helpful is the way we watch these films and the way we bring them to the show. Like we say, we do this to try to understand ourselves better. So in watching these older movies and just thinking about films that way, it makes for a better viewing experience, Joe.
Absolutely, you know, and like you start connecting dots, and like I always find it surprising, even though I even programmed this one, I haven't. Excuse me. Of course, I haven't ever watched these films together, like, you know, paired them up together. But when I put them, when I did watch them, screen them consecutive order this time for the show, it was just neat to see how all three different directors and three different time periods handled their imaginary friends or whatever their fantasy lives and what function that they were playing in
Absolutely.
the heroes,
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
So.
it's totally fascinating. And speaking of that, let's do Brazil. The counselor Adam Shoulder is going to do the introduction. Adam, can't wait to hear what you have to say, man. Do it.